so that you can view the recording later on our YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's webinar, Exploring eBird and Bird ID for K-5 students. So we're really going to be digging into how to get our littlest learners to participate in the eBird Citizen Science projects and how to teach them to do bird ID. So I just want to take a moment for those of you who haven't joined one of our webinars before to introduce you to the Zoom platform. So when I went full screen, it may or may not have gone full screen for you. If it did, I recommend that you come up here and you exit full screen, or you hit escape, exit full screen. And this will allow you to dock the chat window to the side of your screen so that you can see the conversation that's going on there. So to do that, you're going to want to look for the chat button that looks like a speech bubble in your lower portion of your screen, and that should pop up the chat window docked to the right side of your screen. I do recommend that you do this. We'll have a few opportunities throughout to participate in some activities, and I want you all to feel free to just share ideas and discuss as we go on and ask questions in the chat window as we proceed. Just do make sure that in your chat window you are selecting to all panelists and attendees. It probably says just all panelists right now. Make sure you switch that to all panelists and attendees so that you can see each other's text messages as well. All right, so we are coming to you live from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology on a rather dreary fall night, rainy and cold, so it doesn't look quite as beautiful as in this image. But here at the lab, our mission is to interpret and conserve the Earth's biological diversity through research, education, and citizen science focused on birds. And I'm with the K-12 education team. My name is Kelly Schaefer. I'm an education specialist, and I'm joined tonight by Lindsay Glassner, my partner in crime, who's our outreach coordinator. She'll be in the chat window dropping useful links for you and flagging questions for me and answering some of your questions as well. And here on the K-12 education team, our mission is to create innovative resources and training that build science skills while inspiring young people to connect to local habitats, explore biodiversity, and engage in citizen science projects. So our team kind of takes a two-pronged approach to achieving our mission. So we do a lot of educator training. So we want to provide all of the support that educators need to use the materials that we create. And our educator trainings can be online, like this webinar, or our self-paced courses, or in person, like our summer retreat here at the lab, or our workshops and seminars at conferences across the country. Our curricula resources can range anywhere from simple free activities to free lessons, as well as to full paid kits for full science units around owl pellets, or what we'll be talking about tonight some is a new kit for us that we're really excited about called eBird Explorers, and it's articulated across the grade bands. So there's a separate curricula for K2, 3-5, 6-8, and 9-12. And the goal of this webinar is to introduce you to some ideas for engaging K through 5 students in bird identification and participation in eBird. You do not need to be planning to purchase these kits to get something out of tonight's webinar. You can kind of just get a really good feel for how we structure teaching bird identification, but you will see a preview of some lessons that are in the kit. Or kits, I should say. So all of the resources and trainings that we create here on the K-12 education team follow this sort of pathway of moving kids along from connecting to nature to participating in citizen science and then finally participating in inquiry. And so the idea is that we get kids outside, getting their hands dirty, making observations, and then we channel that curiosity into participating with citizen science where students get hands-on experience with scientific protocols, and then finally into inquiry, where they're asking and answering their own questions in science, all with the view of giving kids a chance to connect to their local habitats while really engaging with science in an authentic way. So I don't know if you've ever done this activity with kids, but if you were to ask students to draw a scientist, this is usually what you're going to see. A guy in a white lab coat with some crazy hair, in this case, a pretty awesome mustache, beakers and equations and inside. And so we kind of want to open students' idea and their minds to what science can be. And we want to change their conception of who a scientist is, from this kind of idealized lab setting to people who are engaged in studying the natural world and observing birds in their native habitats. And then finally, to themselves. So what's great about this sort of progression from nature connection to citizen science and then to inquiry is that students start to really view themselves as scientists because they are doing what scientists do. So they're learning science by doing science. All right, so I've said the word citizen science a ton. So let's take a moment and just make sure that we all have kind of a shared sense of what citizen science means. So if you can take a moment in the chat window to share some keywords or definitions about what you think about when you hear citizen science, maybe even some projects that you've participated in. Yeah, and make sure that you are sending to all panelists and attendees. I'm seeing a few people still just having panelists in their messages. Robin's saying that she's participated in Frog Watch, water testing through Riverkeeper, non-professionals gathering data and contributing to professional scientific research. Yeah, that's a great definition. Adding data from personal observations, like a BioBlitz, cool. Yeah, so we really view citizen science as everyday folks helping to put the puzzle pieces of the world together by sharing their observations with databases that scientists can use to answer real-world questions. So we view it as a partnership between everyday volunteers and professional scientists that allows them to answer questions that they couldn't possibly investigate alone. Just to give you a sense of what that looks like, I want to share an image with you. Oops, I'm jumping the gun here because I want to also share with you the programs that the Cornell Lab of Ornithology has. So we have 6 projects here at the Cornell Lab, and they all follow kind of the same protocols, which a lot of citizen science projects that are based on outdoor observations follow very similar protocols. So going outside, identifying and observing your subject, in this case birds, collecting data, entering that data online, and then what's part of what makes the lab citizen science project so special is you have access to that data. So you have access to all of the sightings in the eBird database, for example. And that provides you some really cool opportunities to help your students learn to read graphs through using real-world data. All right, this is the image that I got a little overexcited to share because I love it so much. So if you're looking at this picture, it might look to you like an image of light pollution from outer space, but it is actually an image of submissions to the eBird database. Every point of light on this map is a submission to the eBird database. So the fact that we can see the shape of our world means there's that many people out there who care about birds and are submitting their observations. And what really gets me about this is if you think about what it would take for scientists to recreate this data set, they couldn't do it. It would take lifetimes upon lifetimes. But because there are so many people engaged in this project, the wealth of data allows them to answer questions they couldn't possibly ask on their own. And so it's really people-powered science. And what that looks like by the numbers is we've had way more than 500 million observations submitted to the eBird database, from 38.6 million checklists, more than 490,000 participants reporting 10,507 species of birds. That is more than 98% of all of the bird species in the entire world. So it's a really, really powerful database with really excellent information for scientists to use to help understand trends in the populations of birds across the world. So why, as an educator, would you want to engage with citizen science? I would argue that it's not just great for your kids, it's great for helping you meet your goals. So citizen science and participation in citizen science projects, it naturally helps you meet a lot of your science standards. So the NGSS science practices are really well encompassed by participating in citizen science, following basic scientific protocols, collecting data, learning about the process of asking questions. And then there's all these awesome tie-ins for our younger audiences, our K-5 kids, with some of those other standards encompassed in the Common Core. So it's also exciting in real-world chance to study animals in their own backyards. So it provides kids with the opportunity to connect to their local habitats in a low-cost way. It's available to you as an educator year-round. It helps birds and scientists and really sparks children's curiosity and encourages them to engage with nature in meaningful ways and science in meaningful ways. So I mentioned eBird a lot, and so to give you more of an idea about the eBird project, this project collects sightings of birds across the world any time of year, anywhere that you are. And then the slogan is that every bird counts. So even a sighting of the most common bird or an invasive bird like a European starling is going to be really important to this database. So we want to know everything that you see, whenever you see it and are able to participate. And so eBird collects certain data, and so you have the opportunity to participate in eBird in a number of ways. There is an app that you can use, but for our younger students, generally the approach of keeping a paper checklist and then entering it on the computer seems to work very well. So this is some screenshots of what entering data can be like online through eBird. So the first step is finding your location on a map. The second is entering some date and effort data. So you put in the date that you did your observation, you indicate what type of observation it was. Was it traveling? Were you walking around your schoolyard? Was it stationary? Were you looking out a window at some bird feeders? And then it will ask you start and end time, if you were traveling, how far you went. So just some basic information about the way that you observed birds. And then you enter in the birds that you saw, and eBird does a really nice job of putting the most likely birds for you to see first, so that can help you in your list as well, kind of confirm some of your sightings for you. Oh yeah, this bird's reported in this area a lot. I will often, when I'm in a new place and I'm using the eBird app, I like to have a list going and look at the list and see what are common so I know what I can expect. And as I mentioned, there is eBird Mobile. It is a free app. It tracks the distance you travel for you. So even if you are using paper checklists, you as the leader, if you're out with K2 students, you might want to have a list going just so it keeps track of the time and the distance that you traveled for you. Some of the older students in the 3-5 group or the more advanced students might be really comfortable using mobile technology. So you could theoretically do the app with them, but you have the option of the app or the paper checklist. And what's really awesome and something I want to make sure is a resource that you know is out there is the eBird Essentials course run through Bird Academy, which is the lab's online learning platform. This course is a free course, so you can sign up and take it anytime. It takes about 1 to 2 hours of your time to go through, and it's going to tell you absolutely everything you need to know to participate in eBird with confidence. So we actually, in the curricula that I mentioned earlier, the eBird Explorers curricula that we'll dive into in a little bit, in the introduction, we basically say, take this course because it does a way better job of explaining things than we could do in writing, because it has some really awesome videos that will walk you through the data entry process. It'll tell you about how eBird makes sure that data is high quality for the project. It has all these really awesome checks and balances built in if you are worried about participating in eBird with younger students. So for example, just a check and balance that you will learn about in the eBird Essentials course is that we have eBird reviewers, and they're experts for the birding area that you are in, and they set filters. So they have an idea of, inside the app, what's a normal amount of a certain species to see during a walk. So say you were out and you put in 20 peregrine falcons. eBird might be like, wow, that's a lot of falcons. Are you sure that's really what you saw? And it can flag you to either be like, oh my gosh, I meant to put in 2. We saw 2 peregrine falcons. Or it might flag you to be like, maybe we should make sure that's the species that we really saw. So there are some things built in for you to help you be a better birder, and also help you have confidence in the data that you're putting in. But of course, to participate in a project like eBird, you need to be able to identify birds. There's some awesome tools out there for you. So I want to draw your attention to Merlin Bird ID app. This is another free app from the lab, and it's one that we think is really super effective. It's intuitive for kids, and we actually kind of built part of the curricula around this tool because it is so effective. And what's great is if you don't have access to mobile technology in your classroom, there is a web-based version now that you can use. So that's really exciting. But what's really special about Merlin is that it operates by asking you 5 simple questions about birds, 2 of which your phone already knows. What is the date and where are you? And then it has you put the size of the birds on a scale of some pretty common birds that you're probably familiar with, from a sparrow to a robin to a crow to a goose. Then up to the 3 main colors, what was the bird doing? And then it's going to provide you with a list of possible birds. And then you can listen to songs, you can look at range maps, you can flip through different pictures. And this list is probably only going to be about, 5 to 10 birds long. So eBird does the work, Merlin does the work of narrowing down the birds that you're looking at. So instead of picking up like a huge and intimidating field guide, you have just a much smaller group of birds to work with. So it can make bird identification easier, and it can help you and your students feel successful from the beginning. So it's definitely a tool that we recommend you look into. So now I want to dive in a little bit more into the curricula that we mentioned. There are 2 that we'll be talking about today: the Building Literacy Through Nature, the K-2 curricula, which uses children's trade books to kind of bolster learning about identifying birds and learning about bird life cycles, for example, and really captures the interdisciplinary nature of teaching K-2 audiences. We'll also be touching a little bit on discovering schoolyard birds, which is the 3-5 curriculum. This curriculum is also really great at combining interdisciplinary learning aspects, and does a really good job of meeting content standards both in science and in the Common Core. So for example, there's a really fun lesson on the structure of feathers. So if you looked at those 2 lessons and you were checking out the contents on the side, you probably noticed that the lessons followed a really similar structure. So they both teach bird ID in a really similar way. So we start out with just the basic concept of what is a bird, what makes a bird bird, what makes a bird special. And then we dive into the 4 clues of bird ID. So these are the clues that expert birders use every time that they are outside watching birds. And so both of these are structured around taking advantage of those 4 clues to bird ID and structuring bird identification around them. The poster that you see pictured here on the right side of the screen is included in the 3-5 curricula for your classroom as well. So I want to draw your attention as well to the Inside Birding videos. These videos are a really great resource available to you from our Bird Academy website. If you want to beef up your own birding skills, you can probably check these out and learn something. I feel like I learn a little something every time I watch them. And again, these follow those 4 keys to bird ID. So we've got one video on size and shape, one on color pattern, one on habitat, and one on behavior. So these series of videos are used in both curricula, but used in a different way. So we do use them as kind of teacher background information in K2, and then in 3-5, they're kind of chunked up into little digestible pieces and used for student learning. All right, so let's jump into what is a bird. And our goal with this part of teaching about bird identification is to assess what our students already know, to introduce some local birds to them, as well as just kind of covering what makes birds special. In the 3-5 curriculum, students learn about feather structure as well. And then we move on to introduce citizen science, which kind of sets up the goal of why we want to be able to identify birds. So let's dive right in with one of the first activities that we do when we are introducing what is a bird. We like to play a game, a true-false game, where students get to move to other sides of the room. So we'll set up a true side of the room and a false side of the room, and we'll make this an active participation game. So I put a mix of questions here from K2 and 3-5, just so you can get a feel for the types of questions that are included. And let's take a minute here to go ahead and test our bird knowledge and see if we can't answer a few of these questions. So go ahead in the chat window, we'll go through a few and put in your answer. So let's start with number 1. Birds are the only living animals that have feathers. What do you think, true or false? Look at all these trues rolling in. Absolutely. Feathers are one of the things that make birds totally unique. It's totally unique to birds having feathers. And feathers are really cool because they have so many different functions for birds. All right, let's look at number 2. All birds fly. True or false? False. All right, what's your evidence? Why do you think this is false? Penguins. Ostrich. Absolutely. There are definitely some flightless birds out there. Kiwi, that's a good one. All right, let's skip down to number 4. Birds lose and replace their old or damaged feathers. True or false? True. Yeah, you guys are right. We got a bunch of bird nerds in here, Lindsay. Yeah, so this is true. Feathers are so important for birds for flight, for thermoregulation, for camouflage and attracting mates, that it's really important that they stay in good condition. So birds do molt or replace their feathers once or twice a year, depending on the bird. All right, what about number 5? All birds have thick, heavy bones that provides the structure needed to fly. I'm seeing lots of falses. Why do we think that's false? Yeah, so I'm seeing a lot of they need light bones to fly. Yeah, that's true. The bones, if you've seen a cross section, they actually have little kind of struts that go through them that provide them with structural support but allow them to stay low density. And even have some air sacs that go into the bones that assist with flight as well. And respiration. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Let's skip down. Let's do number 7. All birds lay eggs. True or false? Number 7. All birds lay eggs.
That statement's false, Sally.
Lindsay, what makes you say that?
Boy birds don't lay eggs.
Oh, darn. We do this one because it can be fun. And you almost always have one student said, what about boy birds? The boy birds do not lay eggs, that's true. But all species of birds lay eggs. And we like to have this game create a little discussion because it provides an opportunity for you to have students provide, well, this is exactly why I did this question, so I'm glad you did it, Lindsay. It gives us a chance to provide students with the opportunity to share their evidence or their thinking of why they chose that answer. And then you can let kids change their mind based on the information that their peers provide. So it can be a really cool interactive game and can start to teach students the importance of having some evidence to back up their opinions. Cool. One more. Male and female birds, number 10. Male and female birds of the same species look different. True or false? Of some species, Robin's saying. That's what this is. Yes. Yep, true. So you'll see that a fair amount in birds, even here in the non-tropics. Can anybody think of a good example? Cardinal, yeah, that's a great example. Northern cardinal, the males are so bright red and the females are the same shape, same size, but slightly different color, browner, yeah, for camouflage. Awesome. So 3.5 does dive into sexual dimorphism a little bit in how to identify birds with some fun matching games. All right, let's move right along. So we started to cover what makes a bird, and then in 3.5, oh, let me just take a moment to go back here. I just want to draw your attention to the symbols in the upper right-hand corner of the slides. So as I'm going through, if I forget to mention what activity is in what curricula, you'll be able to see that based on those little icons in the corner. So use that as your guide. And as I mentioned before, you can use this same structure even without the kit to teach bird identification because we find that it's very effective, not just for students, but we use the same sort of structure when we're teaching bird identification to educators as well. Moving right along. The 3.5 curricula includes in this first lesson a section about feathers. And so it gives students the opportunity to examine 2 feathers in a mystery feather pack up close with binoculars with magnifying glasses. They can get a really good look at the structure, they can sketch them out, they can think about what they see when they're looking at it. So it gets their observation skills going. And then they have the opportunity to learn about feathers, structure, and function through some slides, which I'll share with you in a moment. And then return to their feathers and see if they can determine what type of feathers they were based on what they just learned about them. So the slides are really awesome. They have some really cool images that help you understand how feathers zip together and how they have that function. that allows them to create lift and fly. And it goes through all the different types of feathers that you could find. So tail feathers, which can often provide kind of like a direction and like a rudder in flight. The wing feathers that provide lift. The semi-plume and down that provide some warmth. And contour feathers that provide that kind of glossy outer look that holds air. And these slides are kind of drawn from a interactive, which you can access for free on the Bird Academy website. So check out the Feather Interactive that Lindsay's going to share a link with you all to in the chat window. And you'll find some great images like these. All right, so the next lesson dives into those 4 clues of bird identification, and it starts with size and shape, which might seem kind of counterintuitive. I know for myself and for most people when they start birding, it's color, 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 but actually experts will tell you start with size and shape, because these are going to be the clues that allow you to put a bird into its group. So instead of looking through the whole field guide for the right set of colors, you can go to the group of birds. You could go to the thrushes or the jays or the shorebirds or the sparrows. So, and the shape part of it kind of covers family groups. So does size. But size can be really difficult to judge in the field. So we recommend, and we use in the kit, the Merlin Bird ID size scale. So a house sparrow, an American robin, American crow, and a Canada goose. And we have in the kit life-size versions of these birds that your students can use to get used to looking at size and then compare what they see to the size of these familiar birds. So is it smaller than a crow, or is it as big as a goose? These are great ways to start thinking about size when it comes to bird, because you can't look at a bird out on the lawn and accurately guess its length to inches, right? You got to have some kind of metric you're using. And then to just kind of bring home how useful shape can be for determining the bird group, we love to use silhouettes. So I don't know if you guys identify as expert birders or beginning birders, but I bet you can identify some of these silhouettes just by looking at the shape. So let's start with number 2. What kind of bird do you think number 2 is? An owl. Absolutely, yeah. And then a couple people, Leanne and Haley, are guessing a great horned owl, right? We see those ears tufts. That's a great clue. How about number 5? What group do you think number 5 is? Seeing a couple different answers. Waterfowl, goose. Yep. Number 5 is a goose. So now we could turn to the goose part of our books, and if we were able to see some color on the bird, start to identify it. All right, what about finally number 6? What do we think about number 6? Yeah, a gull or a shorebird, absolutely. So medium length legs, look like they might be webbed feet. Oh, looking at 3, yep. Okay, cool. So we can start to see how looking at the shape of a bird can help you identify it to group. Then you add in some more cues that help you see, shape or size, and even some habitat clues, and you can start to identify birds even better, even more accurately. So let's look at this one I'm circling on the screen in the middle. Anybody know what bird that is? Just to group. A dove or a pigeon. Yep. And then I saw somebody scrolling by. Yeah. I saw somebody scrolling by. Here, I got my pointer right next to it, Robin. I saw somebody scrolling by saying a mourning dove. What made you say mourning dove? It's on a wire. Yeah, that's a great clue. Long tail, absolutely. The tail shape, the pointy tail shape. We had an educator tell us once that a student described it to them as an ice cream cone bird. And now that's how I see it. A mourning dove is an ice cream cone bird. And the little head is the cherry on top. All right, let's do one more. Dun, dun, dun. How about this one right here? Yeah, a heron or an egret. Awesome. So we see that long neck and those long legs near the water. Very cool. Yeah, so size and shape can tell us a lot about birds. And so the next part of learning to identify birds is digging into color pattern. And that involves learning bird parts so that you can have a language to describe what you're looking at. And so both curricula, the K2 and 3-5, learn body parts, but in very different ways. So for 3-5, for example, we do what's called bird body bingo. And so this is a fun game that students can play. So they get this diagram of a bird without the arrows that they can color in. And they can color in with a set, I believe it's 8 different colors. And then you, as the leader, get to call out the different parts. So, for example, a green wing or a brown crown. And then if the students have that, it's kind of a Simon Says sort of thing. So it's a really fun way to get students familiar with the different parts of the body. And again, the goal of this is to give them a language to describe what they're seeing, so that if they were outside and they saw an American robin, they would know to say that it has an orange chest and a brown back and a dark head. So it gives you just the language you need to start identifying birds together. And it also starts to introduce the concept of field marks. And so field marks are the idea that there are certain markings on birds that you can see outside or in the field that mark them out for what they are. And so it's usually a combination of a color and a pattern on a part of the body. So for example, white bars on the wing or a white eye ring, so a color and a pattern on a part of a body. And so this starts to introduce students to that idea through a fun game. So we have a mystery bird video. I'm going to take a second to see if we can make this work, where we will watch the video and then I'll go through the steps of Merlin with you to see if we can identify it. So let's get the first 2 steps done. We chose this bird because it's going to be pretty much anywhere in the US. So I'm going to go ahead and enter my current location here in Ithaca, New York. And I'm going to go ahead and say that it was today. And then let's watch our video. So let's talk about some field marks. What are some field marks that you are seeing in your bird in our mystery video? Black dot on the cheek, spots on the back. Yeah, I've seen some dark spots on the wings. A lighter colored belly. The beak is pretty pointy. Nice. Pink feet, that's great. Oh, Robin's noticing a long tail. Okay, I think that's pretty good. So usually when we're trying to identify birds, we want to look for at least 3 field marks that it has in common. If we see 3 things that are the same, then that can help us be more confident in our identification. So let's start going through the steps of Merlin. If you had to guess size, what size would you guess for this bird? It's hard sometimes from a picture, but we have the twigs and the leaves to help us. So maybe between a robin and a crow. How are people feeling about that one? Let's roll with it and give it a shot. Agree. Okay, awesome. What about colors? We can choose up to 3. Gray. Somebody said it had black dots on the wings, so let's put that in. And then buff/brown. All right, let's give it a shot. And the next step is saying, what is it doing? And this one is in trees or bushes. All right, so we've got a northern flicker, and I'm seeing black on the chest and black mustache and spots on the belly. So I don't think that's our bird. Sharp-shinned hawk, this is a bird of prey, so it has a hooked beak. I'm also seeing some banding on the chest in both adult and immature, so I don't think it's our bird. An eastern screech owl, another bird of prey. So and it's got little ear tufts, and our bird definitely doesn't have that. Our bird has a teeny tiny head. Look at this. This one is looking interesting. I see spots on the wing. I see a long pointy tail. I see pink feet and a white belly. That looks a lot like our bird, and that's more than 3 field marks that we picked out together. So let's look through a couple pictures and see what we think. Oh, those look good to me. I think this might be our bird. So I'm going to hit details, and it's going to bring up those pictures. It's going to let us listen to sounds. I thought my sound was on. There it is. All right. Let's listen to it one more time, make sure it works. There we go. When I hear that sound, I can really understand why this bird is called a mourning dove. Sounds like it's crying. So yeah, I feel confident that this is our bird. So I can say, yes, this is my bird. And what this does for the app is it helps it learn that this is one of the ways that people describe this bird, and it learns and gets better all the time. Cool. So that was our Merlin mystery bird. Congratulations on solving it. All right, so the next step in this process is to dive into the focus bird. And so this is an opportunity to have every student in your class become familiar with one bird. So you can choose to do this in a number of ways. You can have each student learns one bird. You can have 2 or 3 students learning the same bird. But how it works is you create a list of common birds in your area. And Merlin is actually a really great tool for doing this. You won't be able to do this on the web version, just the app version. So you open the Merlin app, you click the Explore Birds button, and then you're going to click the menu bar that's in the upper right-hand corner. It looks different on Android. And then you're going to select most likely birds. And this is going to bring up a list of the most common birds in your area if you were to walk out the door today and do a list. So what's really awesome about that is if you're planning for your unit a month or 2 months from now, you can just change the date and Merlin will give you an accurate list of birds for that time of year. And how it does that is it relies on eBird citizen science data, so it knows what's around you during different times of years. And that will provide you a list of the most common birds, and so you can parse them out. You can choose to do 1 bird per student, or for the younger audiences, we'll often do just like 10 birds. And so if you have more students than that, you would just have several students doing the same bird. And then you have the opportunity to kind of tailor what information you want for them. In the kit, it comes with a sheet, so the students have a worksheet to work on and draw their bird and know what other information to provide. So for example, labeling field marks and listening, making sure students find the chance to listen to sounds on their computer or on smart devices, and doing their best to create kind of a scientific drawing. And we find that wording in that way helps students pay close attention to the details. So what's awesome about this is however many birds you have your students learn, you know that you have an expert on that many birds when you go out to do your first bird walk. So if you have 25 students and they each learned their own bird, then that's 25 birds that your group can already have a really head start on identifying when you go outside. And that provides you with a chance to make a gallery around your classroom or make a class field guide so that students can reference these drawings and this information as you go through your unit. So the next step dives into the habitat and behavior parts of bird identification. And it may seem kind of strange that habitat and behavior are part of bird identification, but they play a really crucial role. And that's because birds are usually really, really well adapted to specific habitats. There are generalists out there that can survive in a lot of locations and eating a lot of foods, but even that is evidenced in the shape of their body and their beaks. So these adaptations that help them survive, they can be physical, structures that we can see, colors that we can see, the shape of their beaks, and they can be behavioral. So these 2 clues can provide us with a really good set of information to help us identify birds. Just to evidence how that works, let's start by looking at a picture of this heron. Judging by the shape of the heron's body and its adaptations, which habitat do you think it belongs in? The habitat on the left or the habitat on the right? Forest or wetland? The wetland on the right. Absolutely. And what are some clues that made you feel that way? Those long, gangly legs. Absolutely. Yeah. Long legs for walking in water. Amanda's bringing up that has a really wide wingspan, which can be a little bit difficult to maneuver in the woods. The long beak. Yeah. Another great clue for our fish-catching heron. Awesome. Let's look at another one. All right, looking at this bird, where do you think this one lives? The habitat on the right, the rocky shoreline. What makes you think that? Yeah, the coloring for camouflage. Sure, that's great. even those kind of medium length legs can be a clue that this bird might be occasionally on the edge of the water. So this is a ruddy turnstone. It is indeed a shorebird, and stone is right in its name. So absolutely, the rocky shoreline is where you would find this bird. Let's look at just one more. Our old friend and reliable friend, the pigeon. Where do you think these birds started? Shane is saying everywhere. Yeah, they do a good job of surviving in many places. This is true. But they really did evolve with cliff habitats. So that's why it's no sweat for them to nest on the side of a skyscraper on a skinny little ledge. They're good at it. They're used to it. So what are cities but man-made cliff sides? Cool. All right. So behavior and habitat from the K2 standpoint takes a different approach. So we use the book On Duck Pond by Jane Yolen to really dive into habitat. And it's a really charming story, but there's so much awesome information that you can glean from the illustration. So we do a close reading with On Duck Pond. We discover what makes a habitat. And then we have students create their own habitat mural using this awesome illustration from the book as an inspiration. And then we start to talk about how birds use habitat, because that allows us to think about how they move through that habitat and how their habitat affects their behaviors and what they might look like. So for moving through the habitat, we have students play a fun game called Move Like a Bird. And it can be done in assignments as sort of way too, or you can just go through the movements, whatever your preference is. So stalking like a heron, having students walk really slowly, stretching out their legs and stopping to look for fish. Or the pigeon strut, where students put their hands behind their backs and they walk forward with their head bobbing like our friends the pigeons do. Or the step-stopping robin, who likes to run, stop, and look for worms. Run, stop, and look for worms. So this can be a fun way to just get kids to realize that paying attention to how birds move can be really good clues too. So the final lesson that we incorporate into both curricula is becoming a citizen scientist. And so this is where students get to put to use all of those skills that they learned throughout the curricula and start watching birds for science. Now, both curricula work up to this by having students go outside for practice walks. So this won't be their first time going outside and watching birds, but it's the time that they're ready to start collecting data that can be submitted to the eBird database. And what's great about eBird is doing a complete checklist for eBird only really requires that you're identifying all the birds that you can identify to the best of your ability. And so if you go out there and you have first grade students and you only know about 10 birds, that's fine. You can still do a complete checklist that way. And so students have the opportunity to collect data on an age-appropriate checklist. So the K2 looks a little different. And then they come back inside, see that data entered online, and there's this really cool live submission map that you can have open while you enter your data, and you can watch your area light up and show that your data has been counted. And then each lesson goes to look at some of the eBird data. So for K2, for example, you just pull up a map of robins in your area, and you get to see how many robins are around you. Whereas 3.5 looks at more graphs and data, a little bit more in depth. So this is just kind of a good look at how we tend to structure bird identification and participation in eBird for students. we are really excited to have curricula that have this process written down and worked out for you all. But it is something that you can kind of replicate on your own in your classrooms as well. So the maps that I mentioned absolutely are available to you through eBird for free. And I believe Lindsay can find the live submission map for you real quick. So yeah, eBird, you can use eBird, any part of eBird for free. So definitely recommend you take that eBird Essentials course and poke around the eBird website. I personally have lost hours to poking around the eBird website. Can you just share that one, please? Yeah. So Lindsay's going to share the live submission map, which is the one that I mentioned most recently. All right. And so earlier I talked about why it's great as an educator to incorporate birds into your curricula and citizen science into your teaching because of all the benefits it has for your students and for your goals. I also want to talk about kind of a different perspective. I think that incorporating bird identification and citizen science into your students' learning is really important for the world at large. And part of it is related to this image that I'm showing to you. So a couple weeks ago now, a study came out in Science that looked at the population of birds in Canada and the United States of America over the last 50 years, so since 1970, and was looking at the total number of birds. And they found that bird populations have decreased by 2.9 billion. We've lost 2.9 billion in just 50 years. And this is across all habitats, all groups of birds that we're seeing declines. So it's kind of a broad signal to us that our environments are losing the ability to support life, bird life on the level that they used to. And that can sound really scary and really daunting, and it can be. There's good news though. Certain very specific groups of birds are showing improvements, like raptors, and that's because we regulated things like DDT and their populations recovered. So when we put in effort to conserve birds, we see results. And there are things that we can do and that our students can do to have an effect. These seven simple actions you can learn more about on our website. But the one that I really want to draw your attention to is number 7, which is watching birds and sharing what you see. It's citizen science. And the reason that this is so important is because that data that show that 2.9 billion bird decline, a huge part of it was citizen science data from the long-running Christmas bird count. And into the future, it's going to be projects like eBird in conjunction with this continuing Christmas bird count that are going to detect these large-scale changes in population trends and help us sound the alarm and know how and when to act to protect birds. So by getting your kids interested in birds and sparking potentially a lifelong passion, you can be helping the larger world as well. So citizen science is really powerful for our learners, it's powerful for our scientists, and it's powerful for the future of birds in our world. So I hope that you will consider incorporating birds and citizen science into your classroom, and I want to thank you for joining us and expressing your interest in it tonight. I do also want to let you know that we have free lessons available to you from each of the curriculum, just kind of as a sample. And so the behavior and habitat lesson, lesson 4, is available from the K2 curricula, while the 3-5 lesson focuses on color pattern. And I covered a bit of each of those lessons today in the webinar. So please feel free to download that from our website. Lindsay shared the link with you. And I'm just seeing your message, Leanne, that your first graders pretty much all plan to work for the Cornell Lab of one day. I love it. That makes me feel a lot better about the future.
Yeah, she was asking about the eBird data sheets with the tally sheets, and I believe the one that you showed is 3.5.
The one that I showed is from 3.5. There is, within the eBird Essentials course, there is an eBird Essentials download, which has a data sheet that you can use as well.
I think because she works with first graders, she was just curious about the tally space. So I know for the K2, it does have
we
a
bumped
wider.
up, yeah, we bumped up the space for writing for the K2 so that kids would have more space to write. I know for some of our superstar teachers that do this already with their students that for K students, sometimes the teacher is still keeping the list. And then as the students progress, they might pass it on to the students. Cool. Any questions about what we went over tonight? And while you guys are thinking of your questions, I'm just going to pop up this because we also want you to stay in touch with us. If you come up with a question later, you can always email us. And there is some professional development support available for participation in these webinars. So if you need a letter for one contact hour from us, you can ask us at that email address for a completion letter and we'll send one your way. If you need something more substantial like continuing education units, they are available through our store for if you participate in 5 webinars and complete reviews and then create an implementation plan. Or if you complete 1 webinar, write a review, write an implementation plan, and then write a report on how the implementation went. So there are some options to support your professional development as well. And Lindsay's going to share the link. Great. So yeah, Lindsay and I are going to stick around for a couple minutes. If you come up with any questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat window. Or if you come up with questions later, again, you can always email us at k12lab@cornell.edu.